Ms. Bancroft stuffing money in a briefcase in her office on April 16th. But Corey Hyde didn't testify that Avery Bancroft left the room with that briefcase. Corey Hyde didn't testify where that briefcase went. What the prosecution here is doing today is they're building a case on speculation and not facts. The prosecution has given you a puzzle today and asked you to solve it. But when you try and solve the puzzle that the prosecution has brought to you, you realize that the pieces to the puzzle are just missing. There's no way to put together what the prosecution has brought forth to you today. Now, the prosecution also brought forward Tracy Menetos. Tracy Menetos testified to seeing a $200,000 deposit in Chase Covington's bank account on April 17th. But when Chase Covington took the witness stand, he testified that this money was proceedings of accumulated cash that he had in his house, and that he just deposited on April 17th. April 17th was just a usual day for Chase Covington. He just deposited this money on April 17th. The prosecution has failed to prove to you that the defendant received anything of value, as not a single witness in this courtroom can tell you that they saw Ms. Bancroft give Chase Covington money. But the prosecution would like you to believe that Ms. Bancroft gave Chase Covington money in the form of a briefcase. They brought before you Pat Sikorsky to clarify that Ms. Bancroft had come into contact with this briefcase. But that's exactly the only thing that Pat Sikorsky could tell you today. The only thing that Pat Sikorsky could tell you today is that Ms. Bancroft came into contact with this briefcase at some point in time. That point in time could have been 3 months ago. It could have been 3 years ago. Pat Sikorsky can't tell you when Ms. Bancroft came into contact with this briefcase at all. Now, Chase Covington took the stand, and he told you when Ms. Bancroft came into contact with this briefcase. He told you that he would have Ms. Bancroft, that he would go to Ms. Bancroft's office, and sometimes she would move the briefcase out of the way, that she would come in contact with a lot of his briefcases. Now, the prosecution also points out to the fact that only four of Ms. Bancroft's fingerprints were on the briefcase, and only 2 of Chase Covington's. But did not Pat Sikorsky come in this stand and say that not all fingerprints stick, that only some fingerprints stick to the surface of which they touch it? Members of the jury, the prosecution has brought to you a puzzle, and they have just failed to solve it. The prosecution has failed to prove that my client, Chase Covington, received anything of value or benefit in return for his performance in an official act. And they've also failed to prove that the defendant acted with the intent to be influenced in the performance of an official act. Members of the jury, it's clear that the prosecution has not met their burden today. And as the prosecution came to you today and said that they will find the defendant guilty if and only if the government has proven beyond a reasonable doubt their elements, they have failed to prove this to you today. Find my client, Chase Covington, not guilty. Thank you.